When I heard about, because I was focusing when I first got into true crime podcasting on a regional true crime podcast where I just focused on cases just in my backyard because I love this going and getting documents and just digging into everything and finding it. And just, I'm very familiar with the cities, part of, when you hear podcasts of people who aren't from that area. And so they don't know the city like you would when you live here. So that was really appealing to me. And I was just getting my feet wet. So when I heard about the Warren Forest investigation, I'd never heard of it before. And I've lived in, the Seattle area for pretty much my entire life. So that was of particular interest to me. And then when I heard Norma's story and how she chewed through the rope to escape this serial killer and then was not believed, I just, it just was haunting. It haunts me still. And I get emotional because this has been in my head for so long. 2 years I've been researching this, and it's just, there's just something about someone not being believed, a teenager not being believed, and that really stayed with me. And then when I heard Star's story, and Star, her sister Jamie Grissom, which we hear about in this episode, that love for her sister, that bond, the trauma bond of these two young girls who were in foster care, who were tossed around, and what they had was each other. And I think that it's so relatable. I'm a younger sister, and I was really close with my sister, and I just think that those two stories, I just felt, and of course the others too, but that's how I first learned about the case, was through those two stories.
Yeah. I was really touched the way you opened the whole series, this idea of the rope and the, individual strands that are the ties that bind. And it's kind of this metaphor for this whole case, right? You have so many different strands that each individually you maybe don't see what they add up to when they're put together. And that's what you've really done here, is taken all these different strands and pile them up. Why that idea or that scene in particular? Why did you start there?
With because the rope played such a huge part of this case. It's such a simple thing, and I don't want to give too much away, but I had a situation where I was able to, because I'd heard about the rope so many times in these old documents from the 70s, and it was jute, and it was just like 5 different ways it was described, and I was trying to figure out what would that be like, getting into Norma's head. What would that be like to chew through? And you have to be so careful because victims and family members are different. Some want to talk about what has happened to them and feel like they haven't been heard and haven't been listened to. And I would say that's absolutely Norma. But there's other victims and family members I've talked about in my career where they don't want to talk about the most horrible thing that's happened to them. And you have to respect where these people are in their journey, and at least that's what I want to do. There's no story that's more important than letting it be told in the way that it should be told. So the threads just felt like the rope was just such a huge thing, and such a huge thing in his kit, and what he did to these women, and how he used that to take away their power, or try to. And so it just felt like it just really started building momentum with the rope metaphor, and then turning it on its head of like, well, wait a second, this community is really coming together, and it's these individual threads rather, that have been just kind of twisting in the wind. And then you start bringing it together, and the power comes back. And so that really spoke to me, because that's the thing about this case, is that it's not just the horror of what happened, but the community and the people who have rallied and never given up and helped other people. And I that's a story that just, I never get tired of it. I love it. And the big thing was figuring out how to tell it in a way that people could understand, and not kind of like, I'm confused, I don't understand what's happening, because it's a very confusing case, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. There are so many different angles. And I guess that's why I was so interested in like why you chose that metaphor to start. And it makes perfect sense, right? the task of going back in time, you mentioned doing, records work and searching for documents. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit more about that. What does it take to come to a story, a case that's, 50 years plus old, and try to make sense knowing that people have passed away, records have been lost. You're not always dealing with a complete picture.
Yeah, and this was really frustrating because, fortunately I had experience in getting these records, and there really is a dance between records, people who are the keepers of these records. Like, I really respect the work that they do because it is very tough. It is, you know, nobody really knows what you're doing, but these records are so important, especially, to family members, to law enforcement, to be able to go back and access them. And as the public, we have the right to have these records. And I felt like in the beginning, that was being denied because they were like, we don't have them scanned, we don't have this, we don't have that. And I was just getting really frustrated. So again, the community aspect of like the family members, Norma had some stuff, Star had some stuff. Other people that I spoke to had things. And so I had to just kind of wait. It was a waiting game. They would give me stuff like maybe it took like 4 months just to get my first installment of records, and you'll relate to this, right? And you're just like so excited. But by that time, I'd already gotten what they'd given to me because I'd gotten them from somebody else, and they were so it was just like this thing. But it actually ended up being a positive because they knew I wasn't going anywhere, and I believe that kind of word spread through this smaller community of like, yeah, um, she's not going anywhere. And I just kept at it and kept at it. And fortunately, like I said, I was able to, it probably took me about I would say like 8 months just to even understand what was going on, just because there were so
Wow.
many people had different stories and what was true and what wasn't. And then the record keeping and then the lost records and trying to find them. And so it was a lot.
I can believe it. So, just for some, I guess, contrast, Cold
Hmm.
season one, the Susan Powell case, which is, it was a very big case, international news coverage, and it was primarily investigated by one agency. And so, when I was working on that story for the Cold podcast, you go knock on that agency's door to get those records. And, there would be some other stuff. Maybe the FBI or the U.S. Marshals had pieces here or there. And there was a sheriff's office in Washington State that had a piece. So you're doing some uh, multi, jurisdictional kind of records research. But then you take a look at the case like this that you're working on, where you're talking about a potential serial killer,
Yeah.
and you are tracing victims who lived, all over the place. A lot of the times, these people were, in and out of this community, this Clark County community, and like just the sheer amount I'm thinking of tracking that you had to do in that records
Yeah.
work is kind of mind boggling.
You know what? It truly it truly was. I mean, I can't but that for me is I feel like I'm mind melding with you because it is hard. It's hard to keep it all together and keep it in track. And that's why it took so long. And I kind of cringe now when I listen to earlier interviews that I had, because now that, I'm putting it together, and it was like I was like a babe in the woods. I didn't even know what I was talking about. I was interviewing people, and I would have asked much different questions had I had the whole picture. But that's just a part of the process. You've got that, to go back to the yarn or the string analogy, you've got to untangle it. And it takes time. And that's what's great about shows like this, shows like Cold, organizations like KSL that put the time and resources into allowing these stories to be told. And it is an absolute privilege to have had, um, so many people have touched this. And I'm sure the same is with Cold. We never do these things alone. And, um, so I had the time to do it, and I was just what I was discovering along the way, even though I felt like I was, beating my head up against the wall at times, when I would find something and then I would go run it down, and it would just be, oh my gosh, this is so incredible, so rewarding. And to be able to tell, like Star, she was like, thank you for telling me things that I did not even know. and she's been on this for a long time. So it was great to be able to, regardless of what happens with cases being solved, which we'll get to, later in the series, to give that to family members is something, it truly is an honor to be able to do that.